That's Stonehenge in England, where I'm originally from. And I'll start with that one because that was actually one of the cases that I primarily focused on. Over the years, there have been a lot of UFO encounters over Stonehenge. And when I say over it, I mean literally over it. In the 1990s in particular, there were a lot of sightings of what have become known as flying triangles over Stonehenge. Now, the flying triangle aspect of the UFO phenomenon is a relatively new one. It goes back to sort of the early to mid-1980s. Before that, you didn't really get many reports of these huge black triangles. Now, some people suggest that they're like a next-generation stealth aircraft. But, you know, if they're a military craft, it's like, well, why haven't they unveiled them when they unveiled the stealth bomber and the stealth fighter? But the more we've dug into it, we've actually found a lot of these black triangle reports going back 60, 70 years. But it seems to be the case there's more and more of them today. But many reports, as I said, in the 90s, right over Stonehenge. And the British Ministry of Defence took a great interest in these stories because there were rumours suggesting that perhaps the stones possessed some sort of power or a power source that the UFOs actually sort of derive their power from. You know, it's kind of like the equivalent of going to the gas station, if you like, in simplistic terms, that they use these ancient stone circles as sort of like a rejuvenating energy. And there are a number of available files in the British government's archives on sightings of UFOs right over Stonehenge, and also a village called Avebury. Avebury is situated just a short drive from Stonehenge, and although the stones at Avebury are much smaller, the circle itself is a lot bigger. As you can see, it's actually fenced off now. It used to be open to the public, but that's the closest you can get, which is about sort of a couple of 100 yards. And the reason they did that was because so many people were chipping bits of stone off as souvenirs, and so the stones were getting smaller and smaller by the year, I guess. And you can actually go on arranged tours, but at one point, as I say, you could just stroll around them, but unfortunately that's come to a halt now. Now that's another picture of Stonehenge. I took that one probably about 15 years ago before they closed it off, and you can probably see people walking around there. But you see how high they are, you know, and people say, well, they must have been built very easily. But if you think about it, I mean, you just think of it in literal terms. How would you get that stone standing on top of those two 6,000 years ago? You know, it's not an easy task. You know, it's not like there's any hills around where you can kind of roll it down the hill and hope it lands on the two stones. You know, and people say, well, pulleys. Well, you know, to build pulleys there, I mean, they'd have to be incredibly strong. Some of those stones weigh 25 tons. Imagine trying to put pulleys of trees, you know, then a rope and pull it up. Well, again, you know, it's like good luck a bunch of cavemen or whatever, you know, trying to pull a 25-ton stone up a few tree trunks. It's just not going to work. So that's why, well, I don't say that's why, but I mean, this is where we also have these legends. I said about Merlin, the magician, supposedly magically floating all these stones into upright position and lowering the other ones on top. You know, I mean, we could say, oh, well, it's just folklore. But if it's folklore, it's exactly what was being said in South America, Central America, Mexico, and Egypt. And so far as the history books tell us, at least, you know, nobody from England 6,000 years ago travelled to Egypt, and vice versa. You know, they probably didn't even know each country existed, certainly. And yet each and every one of them has, you know, these exact same stories. There's a story about Stonehenge supposedly originating in Ireland, that the stones were brought across. Now, we know that actually isn't true because we can tell that the actual stones themselves, some of them came about 25 miles away from where Stonehenge exists today. But other stones came from North Wales, about 125 miles away, which is still a long distance. But there are ancient legends and folklore that they were brought originally from Ireland and again floated across the Irish Sea, which separates England from Ireland. So although it's almost certainly folklore, it does tie in with this story about the stones, you know, not being brought across on huge boats, but floated across the oceans. And again, you know, I don't think I mean, I don't think that the island story is a hoax, but if the further you go back in history, you find that I think the ancient people of that era were trying to figure out how somebody had built these huge stones centuries before. You know, there was no sort of historical record then. The people maybe in, say, 500 AD had no idea who built Stonehenge a couple of thousand years before, so they started to sort of create legends and stories. But at the foundation, they still had all these tales about the stones being levitated from Ireland. So, you know, somewhere in there, I think they had some truths, but it got mixed up with folklore and mythology as well. There are a lot of weird stuff, a lot of magnetic anomalies at Stonehenge and a lot of these circles. People have felt, you know, some people kind of feel dizzy when they go by these stones, or sort of rejuvenated. People talked about, you know, sort of headaches being cured and things like that. And animals kind of react differently around stone circles often. Sometimes in a positive way and sometimes not, you know. But sometimes dogs will get excited, sometimes they'll whimper and, you know, run. So this has sort of given rise to the idea that these stones are somehow energised. And that actually ties in with Stonehenge, where it talks about how the stones could reportedly heal people. And what's interesting is that acoustic, I talked about acoustic levitation. Well, there's more and more evidence suggesting that the directed acoustic energy can actually have a positive impact on the human nervous system, and, you know, sort of keep it in good check. So maybe the stories about the stones being able to heal people, maybe that's a basis, in fact, that they knew something also about sort of acoustic technology being related to health as well. So.